Welcome to the LawFather Podcast. How are you this morning, Leb?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Well, I'm in a snowstorm. That's why I'm wearing a sweatshirt and being an unabashed Washington State Cougars fan who will be down in San Diego for a bowl against, I think, the Gophers. And I might just go to that and start broadcasting from San Diego because as our producer Matt has put up on the screen, if you're watching the video of this, we are in the midst of a snowstorm here in Denver, and it's 20 degrees, and he's taken some shots of our office and the weather. So everyone's late, driving slow, and it's freezing cold, and we're trying to survive it. So I understand you're going to get a little snow up there in Portland, too.
Supposedly, we might get some later today. We'll see if it actually pans out. But yeah, I wouldn't mind it. Although the city's not really, set for it. Portland, Oregon. We're great at rain, but not so hot at snow.
Right. Not a lot of practice. No, I started to think last year that this last year was going to be my last winter in Denver. I don't know what it is about my life. I've lived in a place with 4 seasons my entire life, and I usually love the winter. And one of my favorite things to do, and Leb, I think you and I talked about this at one point, because it's one of your favorite things to do too, is that first snow of the year. I used to love to put on my coat and just go outside in the night and just like walk in. It was so quiet and peaceful. And now that first snow of the year, I go, fuck. And I just start to feel cold, even if it's not cold. And I live in a place where snow doesn't always equate to cold. I mean, we get snow on one day, and then the next day it's 70 degrees again, so I don't have much to complain about. But man, it's my hips, my knees, and my age or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's getting older.
Yeah.
Can you tell when a storm's coming?
There's a storm coming. I can feel it in my bum knee.
So I thought what we'd do is a couple of things. I just want to let people know we're going to get to important meat and potato stuff today. Leb and I plan on talking about the 80-20 rule, which has been used in a lot of contexts. A lot of contexts through a lot of different business and personal philosophies. So we're going to talk about that today and how that may apply to your law firm and how it might apply to your clients. But Leb made a good point off camera earlier when we were planning the show that maybe we ought to take a moment just to talk about what it is that we want to do with the show and what we hope to accomplish. And I think that's valid. From my perspective, over 20 years in entrepreneurship, my goal is to kind of experience share of the things that I have learned in business. It took me a long time to reach a level that I would call successful, and by that I probably define that as being able to live entirely off my entrepreneurial pursuits and not to be an employee for anybody. And I think what we're trying to do is help newer firms get there, or help older firms ramp it up. So that's kind of my purpose, and to remind attorneys that their work is important, and that their work is not just about their clients, but that it also has the ability to affect societal change, which I think we desperately need at this moment. So that's what I think. Leb, what are your thoughts? Because I threw you into this thing because I love you.
Well, I agree with that.
I love you so much.
I love you so much, girl.
All right.
I agree totally with the, especially the last part. The work that personal injury attorneys do, and all attorneys, for the most part, is incredibly important. I mean, especially you think about the consequences for product liability cases, everything. Environment. It's kind of the last. Yeah. It's it's somebody's got to fight for the little guy.
Yeah, or the big guy.
And that's their role.
But somebody's got to guarantee.
Or the big guy.
Someone's got to guarantee that system, that ring for the fight continues to exist. And that's, that's what we're facing now is like it's not even that someone's there to fight. It's that there are other people who want to take the octagon out of there, right? And they want to pull all the seats and they want to pull all the lights and they don't even want to have a goddamn arena anymore. And that threat is real, and I feel that, and I feel that when I hear words like frivolous, and I just get fired up, and so I hope that people that listen to our podcast are fired up or getting fired up too, because it's time that we attorneys and non-attorneys alike get together and try and affect some serious change and try and defend what's left of the civil justice system, and then work our asses off to improve it and broaden it, so that no one has to be told, sorry, I wish I could take your case, but I just can't afford to,
Yeah.
I mean,
Totally.
That's the point. Well, very good, Leb. So, like I said, we were going to talk today a little bit about what is known as the 80-20 rule. And I'll tell you where this conversation was derived from. Here at LawFather, we went through a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, or as we referred to internally as 4DX. And there was reference to the 80-20 rule in there, and I thought since Leb and I had both shared that information with our teams and as leaders of our departments, that we could probably derive a podcast from what we learned from that process. But knowing that the 80-20 rule is also something that has been used in so many different contexts, I challenged Leb to go out and tell me if he could find the origin of the 80-20 rule, because I'm not even sure I know what it is. I think I've heard it referenced before, but I don't think that I've ever definitively found it. So, Leb, tell us, what did you find about the origin of the 80-20 rule?
Actually, my dog ate my homework. Nah, I'm kidding. So the 80-20 rule, also known as the law of the vital few, the principle of factor scarcity, or the Pareto principle, it states that for many events, roughly 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. It's named after an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto, who noted the connection in 1896 when he noted that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. And later on, he went and conducted surveys in other countries in Europe and noted similar proportions. And he also noted that 20% of the pea pods in his garden contained 80% of the peas. So it's the whole concept, especially as it applies to 4DX. It's selecting the activities that have the greatest impact on achieving your desired goals and spending more of your energy on fewer goals. Mm-hmm. So often, you get wrapped up in just the day-to-day running of your business, which you have to keep the ship floating. You have to make sure everything's working the way that it should be, and a large portion of energy necessarily gets spent in that direction. Mm-hmm. But if all of your energy gets spent in that direction, it makes it hard to grow your business, figure out how to improve, come up with new products, all things like that. Mm-hmm. So at least in relation to the 4 disciplines of execution, he really talks in that book about 80% of the company's energy going to just maintaining everyday, day-to-day business, the things that always come up, or what he calls the whirlwind in the book. And then 20% of the activity being focused on another term from the book, wildly important goals, or the goals that are really going to, the things that are most important to your business, growing your business, and kind of getting where you want to be. Yeah. So let's take a break from that for a second and go back to the origin of the 80-20 rule and think about taking apart some of the definitions, and then we'll return to 4DX and kind of talk about what it's meant for our own firm. But give me that line again. 80% of the energy. What does it say? It varies depending. It gets
just say
used
that
in a lot of different contexts. It's
say that
roughly 80% of the effects. 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes.
Okay, 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. Okay, so having some people might say to me, well, you're not a lawyer. How are you going to be able to help us? You don't understand our problems. And let me state in episode 1 right off the bat, oh, I know your fucking problems. I'm married to a personal injury attorney, so I go home to all of your problems. So I definitely know what they are. And that's why I'm eager to fix them, because, if I can fix my wife's problems, then I'm going to have a much happier life. Not that my wife makes me miserable by any stretch of the imagination. I love her to death. But I hear more about the problems than I hear about the great days. So, but that being said, I asked Summer this morning on our way in to work, if I were to say to you, to tell you that Leb and I are going to be talking about the 80-20 rule on the podcast today, what do you think that means? And she says, I don't know, maybe, 20% of your, or 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients or something like that. And we talked a little more about it, but what it got down to was, how about maybe 20% of your clients account for 80% of your problems, right? And your headaches and stuff. And when we looked at it in that way, I think she agreed that was probably absolutely right. There always, it seems like in all my businesses, and in my own history, there, including LawFather, and if you're one of my clients and you're listening to this, you definitely do not fall into this. You're a perfect, amazing person.
We're not talking about you.
We're not talking about you. We're talking about somebody else. But yeah, 20% of the clients seem to cause 80% of the whirlwind, if you will, and sometimes that's great. 20% of the clients cause 80% of the work, and sometimes 20% of the clients cause 80% of the headaches. So, but yeah, she definitely said, if I were to think about that, 2 in 10 of my clients create 80% of my work, and it's not necessarily. It's not necessarily, briefs or responses or depositions. It's kind of follow-up things and reassurances and stuff more like on the personal level. And I think that when you can address that kind of stuff head on with your clients, like, the personal stuff and the reassurances, then I think you can probably reduce that down a little bit. But you got to have some systems in place for doing that too. So let's return to 4DX in our context, Leb, and kind of give me your thoughts. I mean, explain to the listeners how that was. I guess what I want to make clear is when you said in the context of the 4DX program that we had gone through, that the author says 80% of your time is spent in the whirlwind and 20% is spent on wildly important goals. I just want to clarify for the listeners that was his goal for a successful 4DX program, and he was not reiterating what is common in offices, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, what he was saying is 100% of an inefficient office's time is spent in the whirlwind. So why don't you kind of break that down for us and talk about the difference, what the whirlwind is, and then tell us what the wildly important goal is.
Well, to lead up to that, he points out that really you can only do really 1 or 2 things well at a time, and that's just the brain's just kind of hardwired that way. That's one of the reasons you can't talk on the phone and type an email at the same time. You're using the same part of your brain, and it's not going to work. The more you try to multitask, you can get a lot of things done, but they're not going to get done to the best of your ability. So his big focus is narrowing down to just 1 or 2 things that are that you identify as being really the important things that you need to accomplish, and that's what he means by the wildly important goals. The things that and instead of like coming at it from an approach of like, okay, we want to do A, B, C, D, and E. Let's all like focus on all of this at the same time. Instead of scattering your brain power, your focus, he talks more about just putting it into 1 or 2 things. And then as far as the whirlwind goes, that really is it's all the day-to-day stuff. It's putting out fires that come up. It's the fixing problems as they come up, there's the day-to-day aspects of running a business.
And your duties. I mean, it is the brief writing, it is the depositions, it is the responses, it is all that
Doing
stuff.
the work.
Doing the work, yeah.
And that's great. You have to, obviously the work has to get done. But if you're trying to grow your company and you're only focusing on doing the work, that leaves no room for how to grow the company. So a lot of people come up with a laundry list of a bunch of different things they want to accomplish and then go after them. And I've noticed this in my own life, as far as like things that I want to do. And it was funny kind of rereading through some of the book recently. I kind of picked out a couple of things like where this has been a problem for me, where I've got a couple of projects here I want to finish, and then I want to learn this skill, and I want to focus on this, and there's also this thing that I want to do in this project. And by the end of it, it's 3 or 4 in the morning, and I'm awake, like laying there thinking like, oh, I got to do that, and then I should do that first. And next thing you know, I'm just exhausted. I'm stressed out because I'm like, oh, why haven't I finished all this stuff already? I should have finished those records, 2 years ago, And it's instead of focusing on one thing and just like banging it out, and then focusing on the next thing and banging that out, and so on and so forth, you just exhaust yourself by just trying to focus on everything all at the same time. And that's literally it goes against the definition of focus.
Right.
If you can't focus just based on the definition on everything.
Right. Obviously most people don't know this at all, but Leb was a fairly accomplished musician. Leb and I played in a band together for 10 years.
Works.
And I would say you're fairly accomplished. I mean, anytime you're getting paid to create music and play music, I would call that pretty accomplished. And Leb and I were both musicians, and we both toured, and we played in a band together for a long time, and have been best friends for a very long time. Way before he was our marketing manager. But when you said, and I've got these 2 albums I'm trying to finish as well, I mean, it reminds me of the books I'm trying to get done. I have 3 books that are halfway done because I can't get focused on just one, as you have 2 albums that are probably halfway done or 3/4 of the way done. And I suspect when we are 70, you and I will deliver to each other a truckload of things we have finally finished all at once that will be totally irrelevant. Like, my book on...
and then we'll just...
Yeah. And then,
all right, well, that's it. We finished.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's our problem. Maybe it's our fear of finishing. Maybe we have a fear of finishing because we're not creative enough to know what's next. But no, I'm just kidding. We'll always be creative enough to know what's next so long as we live in states with legalized marijuana. All right, moving on. No, that's a joke. That's a joke. Dad.
Edit.
But the way I see the 80-20 rule as it had become applicable to our business and how I think it's applicable to law firms is this, simply stated as this. Yes, you have the whirlwind, and then you have the wildly important goals. And as you said, the whirlwind is just those things that you have to do. The briefs have to be written, the depositions have to be taken, whatever, the trials have to be tried, whatever the case may be. Those are the functions of your job that have to be done. And then the 20%, the wigs, and I don't remember if this came from the book or if we made it up, but it was wildly important goals. And our challenge to our staff, Leb, if you'll remember, was to treat LawFather as if it were also a client. And if LawFather had represented 20% of our revenue, how would we treat that client, right? And so we had all agreed to dedicate 20% of our efforts to growing the business. And I will say that, let me ask you this, Leb, did that work?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we got more clients. It was a big boost.
It was that year that we implemented 4DX. And they don't pay us any money, so this isn't a plug for them by any stretch of the imagination. But that year we had almost 100% increase in revenue. I mean, we had almost doubled. I can't remember what the figures were exactly, and I'm certainly not going to let my competition know what they were, but I think that when those bonuses went out, the staff knew I was pretty happy, Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when we all got on board on that, and when we all put the time in, I think it definitely paid off. So,
yeah.
But going back to the payoff, I mean, think about that in that context in that year, and maybe chime in now.
Well, I mean, as far as
as far as why that was successful. Like I said, the point I'm trying to make is we then went and treated LawFather as if it were our biggest client, right? We put 20% of our resources behind the development of LawFather. Some of the things we did were we got new and better equipment. We rebranded. We made brochures. We made DVDs. We made videos that talked about every single aspect of our business. We got Infusionsoft and sent out periodic newsletters. We did things at the company that big boy companies do or big girl companies do that we hadn't done before because we were so wrapped up in the whirlwind, myself included, that I didn't feel like I had a second for it. But you want to know when I got a second for it? When we made a second for it.
Yeah, and I think that's a big point. I mean, and I think that's why he uses the term whirlwind. When you're in it, you exactly that. You don't think you have any extra time. But it is one of those things. You make time, and when we made the time and we took the effort, 20% ended up really having a big effect on our bottom line as a company. And that's really the point. You can get large outcomes from small energy, but directed in the right way.
Yep.
And at the right things. And I think that's the big point, big outcomes from small, better spent energy.
Yeah, and I think if you think about a law firm, right, and you're let's roll it into the law firm text or context. You're thinking, okay, well, I'm a lawyer, right? All right, and so I have some responsibility in this. But, my receptionist, he doesn't have any responsibility. My paralegal, she doesn't have any responsibility. My office manager, she doesn't have any responsibility. My other paralegal, he doesn't have any responsibility. So who's going to do this? Am I going to do all this? Well, where did we start? Who was responsible for 4DX at our company?
Everybody was. Everybody, yeah. Everybody had a role to play, and one of the things I really liked about that program was he puts a big he puts a lot of attention, a big emphasis on having the staff determine somewhat what their role is. Mm-hmm. So. And, depending on, for large corporations, maybe they've got I think he uses a shopping mall as an example. For those things, you've got maybe the manager of the shoe department knows what better that department than the manager of the whole store, because that's all he focuses on. That's all he's paying attention to. He's seeing what works on a day-to-day basis, and he's seeing what not works. He or she's seeing what not works. So getting people that you're utilizing their expertise based on their position to have them tell you, okay, this is what's not working. It's really it uses the strengths inherent in an organization to determine what needs to be fixed. And I like that a lot. I thought I think that's a really smart way that he organizes the program. Like, use the people that you have on the payroll, ask them what's not working and what needs to be fixed, and then hold them accountable to fixing it. But give them the support they need, but let them be self-determining somewhat.
Yeah, and I think that self-determination. I mean, it is so important. I mean, because you know what, a lot of lawyers, I'm sure, just like a lot of business owners, they just forget to ask. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes they just forget to ask their receptionist, what do you have in trouble with? And what do you think might be a better idea? I think as owners, we're so used to people, coming to us and saying, I have a problem. And then the expectation is that we are somehow going to solve it. And what I liked about 4DX is it required, or I don't know if it required, but that I kind of gave a mandate that says, I want to know about your problems, and when you come in to talk to me about them, give me your suggestions for fixing them, because you're the person you're the person in the best position to do that. Maybe Matt, our producer, is kind of nodding his head here, like maybe that makes some sense to him. You have any comments on that, Matt? Yeah, as the newest employee of LawFather.
Well, I'll say that even setting up this podcast, like, it's something that's my responsibility, but it motivates me more as someone who's in charge of something to get it done. I'm not waiting around for someone to tell me what to do. It's more motivating if I can take charge of a project and be able to troubleshoot it and be able to problem solve it and make sure that it's running well. And then it's on me if it passes or fails. But because there's that pressure, it's more exciting, but also it's more likely to succeed. And then you're spreading out the workload.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to reiterate, what did I said, here's your job about this. What did I say your job was if you had to say that?
That you wanted to sit down and for everything to be working.
Yeah, exactly. Like my description for him was just go and make me the most kick-ass podcast so that I can just sit down and start talking and let him figure that out. That's probably piss poor management, but that's worked for us. No, I'm just kidding. But like he said, you say it, Matt. You felt empowered.
Yeah, well, and on top of that, too, I had the resources. I was like, okay, you need to get this bit of gear so that we can be able to get this to run smoother, and you trusted that was the correct decision and went ahead and purchased that. It's having all of that as well, I think.
Yeah, I think if you're going to go with the 4DX thing and you're actually, or any process of accountability, any process of growth, any process of involving your team, you have to ask them what it is that they need to be successful, but then you've got to back it up, And so I learned from a guy that I worked for a long, long time ago. Probably my first job in the legal business in Colorado was working for a guy named Don Knox who owns Law Week Colorado, which is a newspaper here in Colorado. But anyway, he taught me, and he may not even realize this, and I don't care if he does, but he's a great guy. But he taught me to not let money be an obstacle to any business development. So I believe I was their very first salesperson selling advertising when they decided that that the newspaper, which I believe had been traditionally supported for many years just through subscriptions, could also benefit from advertising. And so I think I was their very first advertising person. It was when I had just kind of met Summer. But, I was saying, gosh, I don't even remember what it was. Maybe I needed a laptop or I don't know what it was. But he said, do you really need it? And I said, yeah, I really need it. And he said, is it going to make you successful in the position? And then I said, yeah. And he said, okay, well, buy it. And I was like, well, do you want to know how much it costs? He said, no, because you told me you really needed it, and you told me it'd make you successful in the position. And that is how I've lived since then. I mean, in my previous businesses, I didn't have resources. And hell, at LawFather, I didn't have resources when I was, working out of the basement of my house. My house was my first resource before I had an office. So sometimes it's hard to do that, but a lot of times it's necessary to be successful to not let money be that obstacle to empowering your team to do what they need to do. So if I tell Matt, if I give him that directive, Matt, go create the most awesome podcast for me, and he comes back and says, well, I need this, this, and this, I don't ever ask him what it costs. I don't care. If he tells me it's the best that we need, or it's what we need to be the best, then send me the link so I can purchase it. That's it. Any thoughts on that, Leb?
And along those same lines, I mean, you can always find excuses. You know what I mean? There's always going to be something, whether it's money, whether or not you think you have the know-how or have the time. There's always excuses, and excuses are a real fast way to not do anything. So, I mean, I think it's really important, and we all feel that way. We all kind of that voice always pops up into everybody's head, and it's important to know when to ignore it.
Yep. So that is the lesson there. If you're going to treat your business as if it is 20% of your revenue, as if it is your biggest client, and if you're going to invite your staff into the process, which I think you absolutely have to do, then you have to be prepared to give them the resources, whether that be time or treasure, to let them be successful in those positions. And I think if you end up with people who make excuses instead of making plans, those are people that probably should be let go. There's something that I learned from another book. I believe it was called The Power of Innovation. It's a much older book, but it was how might we statements. When we see hurdles, and we can do a whole podcast on this later, but I like people who, when they see a hurdle, they say, how might I fix this problem, or how might we do what has been asked of me? Not, well, here's why it won't work. Second I hear that, I know that you're not a good fit for us. So Well, Leb, I think that's about our time, unless there was anything else important that you wanted to add.
I think we covered it pretty well. Sounds good.
All right. Well, this has been the LawFather Podcast. I've been your host, Travis Luther. My other co-host has been Leb Borgerson, and my producer has been Matthew Shrimplin. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to like us. Make sure to subscribe to us. Make sure to leave us some comments on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening. But know that we care about what you do. We care about your clients, and we care about seeing you grow your firm and be successful. Thank you.